America has been humiliated. The propaganda machine, you know, the state-controlled news networks like CNN, all of those people are humiliated by a Russian fighter pilot, the jet, that peed fuel on this sophisticated Reaper drone, and it was downed into the Black Sea. And now they lost face. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to tell the people in America to keep the faith and believe that they're going to defeat the Russians in this proxy war. But new news, the Russians made their way towards the crash site, as I told you guys. They will collect information. Now I see CNN already says the Americans already they already scrapped all the the info that may be on this Reaper drone or in this Reaper drone. Bullshit. Do you know a Russian hacker, my friend? There's going to be information that they've been spying, all this kind of nonsense coming out soon. The Russians had a big win on this one. And the truth is, my friend, Zelensky is running out of men, he's running out of ammunition, America's banks are collapsing, and Russia is winning. And here in China, this country is just winning with peace and a healthy society and obviously economy that's booming. But please keep your eye on CNN fake news and see all the pieces they do on Russia now. I just saw a video where they say, oh, the Russians are teaching their young children in kindergarten to become fighters. Listen, they lost face. It's a big win for the Russians. Enjoy your...
I guess, just first and foremost, run us through what we think happened and what the US said happened yesterday with this particular case.
Yeah, good morning, Wilf. It is worth setting the context to this because it's a pretty dramatic footage, isn't it? In response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, NATO has been reinforcing the eastern flank of NATO, operating a lot of military aircraft fairly close to Ukrainian airspace and Russian airspace, all designed to deter further Russian aggression along the way. But those same aircraft can now provide eyes and ears over the whole of Ukraine and Crimea. And, of course, with the Western support for Ukraine, as of drone on an intelligence and surveillance mission, the Americans have admitted that, was intercepted by two Russian Su-27 flankers. The East and the West routinely operate, so they're the flankers shown there. They routinely intercept each other's aircraft. That's why we have quick reaction in the alert in the UK. We were reporting the other day about the same sort of thing in Estonia. But they normally just handle very professionally. On this particular occasion, obviously the drone is unmanned. The Russians intercepted it. And, of course, the US reported that there was fuel dumping going on. And ultimately, they said that the propeller had been damaged by the Russian fast jet aircraft, which ultimately ended up in downing of that aircraft.
And so they've obviously now, the Americans, released footage from how this all unfolded. I mean, firstly, why would they release this footage, and what does it really tell us?
Well, the footage is here, and I think part of the reason they would be doing that... Well, first of all, it takes a while because you've got to declassify it. Normally, these video footages are covered in lots of really detailed numbers. It's worth pointing out that the video footage is looking backwards at the tail of the aeroplane. You can see the propeller because this is pushed along by the propeller from the back. The Russian fighter, it's worth pointing out that these drones normally operate at about 200 knots, and at those speeds, they're quite manoeuvrable. The Russian fighter you see here is normally operating at 2 or 3 times that speed. So it's not very manoeuvrable at those speeds. And what you're seeing there is the Russian is almost certainly trying to dump fuel over the engine. And by doing that, by coming from underneath the drone, using its wash to wash the fuel into the drone's engine and therefore take it out. The trouble is, as he pulls the aircraft up, he hasn't got the aerodynamics because he's not flying very fast and therefore washes his way, gets very close to the body of the drone and almost certainly just clips the propeller. Now, almost certainly from a military perspective, this is not intentional. It's intentional to dump the fuel. It's not intentional. You would not, as a fast jet guy, when I flew jets, you would not want to risk your aircraft by clipping another aircraft. The consequences could be quite severe. The trouble is with the propeller damaged. Unfortunately, propellers are pretty high-tech bits of kit, and without that, it was down. Catastrophic for the drone, almost certainly damaged the aircraft. What we don't know is what damage
obviously the Russian aircraft is manned, so it's a significant risk-reward trade-off there for the Russian plane. I mean, it seems like they achieved their aim, though, one way or another, to bring down the drone. There's sort of, maybe uproar is too strong a word, but disappointment from the Western side that they did this. Can we be that surprised or annoyed by that action? I get that you're saying it's international waters, but it is the Black Sea, not the Atlantic. There is a war on near there that NATO supposedly isn't involved with. So, I mean, I guess, is it understandable that the Russians would test the boundaries of what's international airspace during these sorts of times?
Well, two things. First of all, I would probably just hold you to account slightly. I think the Russians were having a go at interfering with the mission. Whether they actually wanted to bring the drone down or not is another matter. If they wanted to bring it down, just use the bullets. Just fire at it. I think this was almost certainly an incompetent Russian pilot that accidentally clipped the aircraft and took it down. But into your broader point, I think this was international airspace, and under international law, any act against another platform is an act of war. Now, let's be clear, I take your point that this is right close to the battle zone, but Russian aircraft are routinely penetrating UK airspace, and we don't routinely go up there and shoot them down. There is a professional way that each side tests its defences. This was not in Russian airspace. Yes, it was close to Russian airspace, but Russian airspace provides a buffer zone before it gets to Russian territory. And this was evidently an accident. The trouble is, with this whole war going on, so you see the Black Sea, the remnants of the drone will have gone down there. That's dominated by the Russians, and it'll be very difficult for the Americans to help to retrieve their drone at the end of this. But I just think it just demonstrates this accident shows the unintended consequences of an escalation in tensions that could have catastrophic consequences for escalation of the war.
Yeah, really interesting, Sean. Thanks for the context to those quite incredible pictures. Sean Bell, as always.